because it'll give you a little idea of really how books can come into existence. Do you mind telling a little bit about that, Charity?
Nope, I don't mind at all. So it started, I have Anne and I both actually have a long-standing friendship and professional relationship with L.L. Barkat, who is the publisher and owner of Tweet Speak Poetry and TS Poetry Press. And so I am a regular writer there. And at one point, a couple of summers ago, she asked me to sort of think about my writing life and whether or not writing about my writing life could be some kind of project. So I just started thinking about what my writing life consists of and what are the things that I regularly do that make a writing life successful for me. And success is a slippery word, so I use that in whatever way you want it to mean. And so the list, I took notes. The list ended up having about 12 items. I thought maybe she wanted me to write a little series of articles about it. She said, no, this could be something more. This could possibly be a workshop. And so at that point, she invited me to either do this myself or maybe it would be helpful to bring someone else on. And she particularly mentioned Anne, because Anne and I have been friends for quite some time, colleagues. We've worked together in all kinds of contexts. And as we began talking, and the more I thought about what the writing life is about, I realized that a book about the writing life, while all kinds of writers write individual memoirs or books about the writing life, but having a book that would have two voices in it. Well, at the time we were even just talking about a workshop, but having two leaders who have similar but actually quite different stories about writing would really make it more meaningful to the workshop participants and then ultimately for readers. Mm-hmm. So it's not just, it's not even that there's just one way to do it or two ways to do it, but having two different stories I think is a constant reminder that it's going to look different for each of us. So that's kind of how the book was an idea, and then it was a workshop, and then after the workshop went well and LL had reviewed the content, she said she offered us a book contract for writing this out. And I think it's been, it was really important for both Anne and me. After we've taught the workshop that first time, our writing lives both dramatically shifted, both of ours. Mm-hmm. Anne moved into doing writing coaching. Within a couple months after the workshop, I actually resigned from my full-time job and became a full-time writer. And so I'm not saying that those things are going to happen to you, but the process of thinking about these 12 items, these 12 habits or these 12 practices really are the thing that over and over and over again, I think in your life you're going to be bumping up against these 12 things. Mm-hmm. And that's why we called this the writing life and not really the writing career book. Is I have a writing career now, but I've had a writing life for a long, long time, and my writing life has been rich and rewarding long before I ever made any money doing it. And in fact, it will go on. At some point, I'll probably stop making money from it, and I'll still have a rich and rewarding writing life because of the things that are in this book and the things that we do over and over in our lives. So that's a little bit about the book. Anne, do you have anything to add just about the book? Or
no, it's just been a wonderful experience encouraging writers through, the distance of the book. It has a reach, and that's, I think, one really joyful part of being an author. But, blogs do too, so that's why we continue to send the message out through articles and through our blogs and, guest being interviewed or guest posting places. It continues to, and being here. This right here, right now is a great example of why this whole process has been so wonderful. And if I may transition and now into some practical matters, one reason and one way that we could do this kind of work and continue to do this kind of work is because we have arranged our lives to do that. And that's one of the chapters, is arrange. Although I'm going to throw in some of the notes as well, since that came up. But we wrote this in the circumstances of life, and that's one of the messages that we try to get through with this, is that our writing lives happen in the context of the rest of our lives. And we have to figure out the tension, how to balance that, and it's never going to be completely, perfectly balanced, I don't think. Maybe in one given day you might have a wonderfully balanced experience, but usually, maybe you had to sacrifice a little time with family and there might be a little frustration, or vice versa. Maybe, people are dragging on you at home in a way that's keeping you from your work, and they know it and you know it, and there's tension there. So we live with that tension. But we can arrange our lives in a way that supports our writing goals, or if we don't have writing goals, just our writing activities. But I think that we can do this. We can create and arrange a life that allows us to be creative and involves some of the life-giving aspects of what we're trying to achieve with the writing that we do. One thing I did, I want to be super practical here. I had a very unusual and stressful year this past year, and I was away from my house. So even though I've arranged my desk to be super efficient and I've got everything I need in all my drawers, and so when I sit there I can really do my work, well, that all went out the window when I had to be in the car, I had to be in hospitals, I had to be in a nursing home for my dad, and so life just got completely upended and disrupted. And because I've always done this in the context of parenthood, I've gotten used to the idea of having to be open-minded, flexible, and on the go. So I have this pink backpack. It happens to be pink. It's not that I'm like really into pink. I just got one that was pink. And I fill this pink backpack with items that allow me to be mobile. So no matter where I am, whether I'm just going down the road to the library, or I am at the hospital room, or I am at a conference like you guys are now, I have now a system where I take certain items in there, which would include, and different people use different things. You might have an iPad, but I use a computer. So my MacBook Pro goes in there, all the charging cords, my phone, and I went ahead and invested in a hotspot option that I can have at the minimum amount, and then I bump it up as needed. It's a mobile workstation. And no, it's not ideal. But I can I've actually carried on some of my coaching appointments in the hallways of strange places, or in the car, and it just allows me to carry on my writing life in imperfect conditions, because if we wait for imperfect conditions to do our work, we're never going to get a word down. And so I just wanted to mention that from the top to say, I know a lot of you were saying, how can I do this in the midst of my busy life? So committing to it and being consistent is one thing, and we definitely would benefit from that, from a little habit, building in a habit, but also I think building in a way to be flexible is a super practical thing to consider. It doesn't have to be a pink backpack. It can be any bag that you love to carry, but just keeping it loaded with even things like Post-its and pens and Sharpies and got cards so you can write notes, real-life notes to people, and send those, and then of course you want stamps and an address book if it's not on your computer. All those things make it easier so that when you are out and about, you can easily take notes, and then paper notebooks in case your computer does run out of batteries and you can't find a plug-in. So just think really practical, and then have that thing loaded, so all you have to do is add the big basic things. But then when we talk about that idea of being consistent, it is really a matter of training ourselves and building in habits. And those habits can be supported with apps and methods and systems, and everybody is different. And that's why, like, even when I'm coaching people, I really try to get a feel for whether this person really likes digital app-like things, or are they analog. So if somebody's analog, I might mention something like a bullet journal to capture all their ideas, or any kind of journal, just to write down those ideas and have that journal with them always. Whereas somebody who's a little more digitally confident, I might suggest different ways that they might collect their information on an app. It could be anything from a Google Drive document to just any of the little note-taking apps that are out there on any phone, whether it's Android or Apple product. But there's also ways we can start thinking about our time, and I think that's a big part of figuring out our writing lives, is figuring out where is our time going. And so one thing that I started doing was being more faithful to figure out where my time is really going. I used, and you can use many different ways to do this. You can just use a timer and write it down on a piece of paper. You can log it in an Excel worksheet. But I was using something called Toggle, T-O-G-G-L. And it was just easy because it was on my phone and it was on my computer. And it's just, all it does is do a time inventory. That's what I used it for. You could use it to time clients if you had clients and you were trying to charge them. But I don't know, nobody really mentioned that kind of work. But all I did was I would start the timer in Toggle. I would name the project or the activity. So I was trying to be really honest. You know how you keep a food diary when they say that's the best way to diet, and you write down absolutely every piece of food that goes in your mouth, like one M&M, write it down? That's what I was trying to do. I was doing a time inventory. So if I was on Facebook, I was being honest. I was like, Facebook, start the timer. And I was astonished how quickly I would tumble into social media, and I don't think I really fully realized how much time I had just been messing around. Now, you know, all of us as bloggers know that we have to have social media element to our lives, and so some of that is intentional and even needed to support our blogging activities. But this was sort of like, yeah, okay, I'm a little embarrassed because I was just watching the BuzzFeed videos and slideshows. And so that was really revealing, and I did it for probably just the inventory idea where I didn't really change my habits for about 2 weeks. And that's when I started to learn, oh, okay, there's a better use of my time here. So then there's a similar program called Rescue Time that you may have heard of, and some people use that. And then I was able to use other techniques and approaches to using now the time that I was going to direct in a more practical manner. So for example, I used an idea called the Pomodoro. You probably heard that, the Pomodoro technique. It's promoted by people like Michael Hyatt and Jeff Goins, where you think in terms of 30-minute cycles. So for 25 minutes, you set your timer. You say, I'm going to do this task. If it kills me, 25 minutes. It commits to this specific task or activity. When the timer goes off, you can take a break, 5-minute break, and then you can come back around and start a new cycle of 30 minutes total. So I did that, and that kept me super productive. I could really devote time to a given task and get her done. There are many other ideas, too, for how we can manage our time and structure things. I know another approach is what Charity's been doing. Charity, you want to talk about some of the things you've been doing in terms of even thinking delegation?
Yes. I actually haven't done this yet, but I have been thinking about it. That's why I had that crazy look on my face. So what I am learning about the writing life, and you guys will learn, I should have learned this earlier, this is not something that only professional writers encounter, is that for every 3 hours of writing you do, there's probably an hour of non-writing activities you have to do. So if you're writing a beautiful blog post, you've sat down and done the writing, well, now you have to find photos, and you have to prep the post, and you have to schedule it. Or if you have gotten to the point where you've started submitting your work, well, now you need to contact editors, and you need to track your submissions, and you need to go back and find out where they are. So some of that, I call it administrative work, or just non-writing writing work. I'm learning that there are actually people in the world who love to do that kind of stuff. And they work for companies like Fiverr, or they work for companies like Fancy Hands. So even things like designing logos, or maintaining your website, or if at some point you're sending out invoices, things like that, you may want to think, there may come a time for you, and I'm getting to that point where I'm beginning to think about this. What do I do really well? And what are the things that just suck the life out of me, or that I'm not very good at? And are there people that I could ask to help me with those things? Now, the two services I mentioned are places where you can pay people to do those things. I was just at a writing group on Thursday, and 2 of the writing group members are bartering. So one of them is, it's not writing related, but I'll just give you their example. One of them is a piano teacher, and the other one has a kid who wants to take piano lessons. So the one lady, while her son is taking piano lessons, or somehow she cooks dinners, she cooks extra dinner 4 nights a week for the other friend, and then that friend provides free piano lessons to her son. So they exchange a service that each of them have decided, I'm not good enough or I'm not able to teach my son piano. And then the one who's a piano teacher says, making dinner every night is taking me away from my work. Now, each of us is going to have our own priorities, our own talents, our own way, different people in our realm. But that is something that I've started really considering, because there are a lot of people in the world who know how to do things that I do not know how to do. And I'm also good at just a few things too, and there might be a way. So just thinking about all the work you do and whether or not all of that work is the best work for you to be spending your limited time on. Even if you have teenage children who might be able to help out with some of the loading of blog posts, or if you have grandkids or neighbor kids who, you could pay $5 to do all your $5 a week to load your blog post or something. If that's going to help you make progress in your writing life, that might be something to consider. Or maybe it's, you make your kid do that instead of vacuuming. It can be their new chore, maybe, or something.
And that goes with,
want to barter. Go ahead. No, that's all.
Well, it just goes with another idea that has come to my attention from a friend of mine. Her name is Janae. Janae wrote an article for somebody else, so it's on somebody else's website. But the idea is we need to think, or let me take that back. We tend to think about managing our time, and that's what we're talking about right now. But she says time is quantifiable, and we think we can manage it, but really if we would start thinking about managing our energy, we would probably be more productive overall than if we just focused on the time. And so she has a whole blog post, and we can send you this article link. She has an article about this whole idea, how even think about how activities give you energy or suck energy, kind of what Charity was saying about things you might delegate, and put a little plus sign next to something. This is something that energizes you. And then make a list of all the things you have to do, and the ones that have a little negative sign, the minus sign, because it's sucking energy from you, that could be something you could look into. Could I delegate this? Or at least can I do this at a time of day when it's not going to ruin my creative output, that is maybe a plus sign thing. So the more energy we have, the more we can really pour into getting those ideas down on paper. I think some of you were saying that was one thing that's been a struggle. Maybe you're trying to do it at a low energy time of day, or maybe you've had a lot of things happen during the day that have drained you, and so you just have nothing left to be able to do that kind of work that is actually energizing, but you've let that tank go too low. So we'll provide that link somehow. Charity might be working on that now, and send that to you, because I think it's super helpful and a different way of thinking about our lives. And then another practical idea, too, I wanted to suggest to you that's really changed my life is having a master to-do list, whatever that looks like, where absolutely everything goes on it. It goes with a system of management and organizational approaches called Getting Things Done, GTD. This guy, David Allen, has developed a whole way of thinking about organizing our lives. And it's the GTD principle, one of the main ones, is getting everything down, absolutely everything, downloading it from your brain so you stop worrying about it and being afraid that you're forgetting something. And you can, again, use analog or digital methods to capture these things. And some people love putting them all in one place, whether it's one master list piece of paper, a journal, a bullet journal, and you can look up and learn more about bullet journals if you're an analog person. People love these things. They go crazy. Go on Pinterest and you'll just see people with colored pencils and everything. I tend to be a little more digitally inclined, so I like a program called Todoist, Todoist. I'm getting no money for recommending it. I just love it, and I can organize it into projects. So I can just throw everything in there and assign it to a project, and it's really helped me organize my writing life and the whole of my life. And it's that holistic approach that we're talking about. I can have everything from practical family tasks in one project, and then all of my writing things in applicable projects as well. There's other programs like Wunderlist and Workflowy and all these kinds of things, and I'm sure you all can find the one that fits you best. This is one that just happens to fit my personality. So again, take notes if there's anything that we've missed or skipped over that falls into this category. And Charity, if you have anything to add, please jump in. But I know we talked about moving on to the idea of surrounding ourselves and engaging with people. So I thought I'd pass it off to Charity.
Great. By the way, I did send links to the article about Manage Energy, Not Time, about getting things done and Todoist into the group chat. Kate, do you see those?
Thank you. Yeah, they did come up. Thank you.
Great. Maybe those can get emailed or distributed to the group. Well, one of the things that, one of the questions that we received prior to this morning or this afternoon is some people had asked about how to find writers in real life or how to find writers to connect with. So we kind of smushed together two more of our habits, surround and engage. Surround, in the book, surround is really the idea of having people, activities, books, experiences, information around you that keeps you inspired and not drained. And sometimes with surround, it means, which we have a whole chapter on limit, but in the surround chapter there's a lot to talk about when it comes to limiting, because a lot of the things that we read and a lot of the ways that we spend our time online may not actually be feeding us creatively, they may be draining us. And likewise with people, and with people we have to be, and I guarantee that I want you to know that I want to be very careful about saying this, but there are people in your life that help you creatively, and there are people who do not. And the people who do not help you creatively, it's not like you can suddenly say, you're no longer my sister, or I'm leaving this family. But on the other hand, knowing whether or not you have people in your life who are encouraging you creatively may be a motivator for making sure you go out and find those people. So for those of you who just already at home have a community of people or online feel thoroughly encouraged and full of energy from the people you're with, those are the people that you really want to dig into when it comes to your writing life. Like, you may actually want to bounce ideas off of them. You may want to meet more often. This retreat sounds like a wonderful idea, a great way to start engaging with other writers. So if you have people in your life like that, I would say one way that you can help stay inspired for writing is to make sure that you regularly interact with those people about writing. It's one thing to have a neighbor who you borrow sugar from or whatever, but if she happens to be a writer, make sure you're setting aside time to actually talk about your writing lives so that you can mutually encourage one another. But there are a lot of us who live in places where we may be the only writer we know. And I sometimes forget that because I spend a good amount of my time online, so I feel like I know every writer in the country sometimes. I feel like we're all of us, we all know each other. And then I forget when I look around in my community, I don't really know any writers in my immediate small circle or my immediate small town. And Anne and I thankfully live in the same state, which is a real blessing. And we used to live 20 minutes from each other, and now it's more like 45. And actually it was more like 25 and 50, but we always shave off 5 minutes for some reason, and that's why we're always late when we get together. But we live close enough that we do get to see each other in person sometimes, but it's not like all of us have someone that we already know who's a writer. So a few ideas for finding those people is, well, and one question that we thought about, a lot of times when you're looking for writers in your community, you may find some writers who may not necessarily share everything in common with you. For instance, they may not be Christians. And if your goal is to find other writers, one of the things you will want to determine for yourself is whether or not you will be most encouraged by other writers who are Christians, or whether or not having just a group of writers from all kinds of beliefs and backgrounds may be a way for you to use your writing to reach out to others. So that is something that you may encounter as you're looking for writers in your area. Another one is any kind of literary event that's going on in your area, especially at libraries. if you're not already actively involved in your local library, you may be surprised to find out all the kinds of literary type events that are going on there. And I have tended to find writers at libraries. Look at the calendar of events, talk to the librarians. Writers, it's kind of like a mecca for writers, I guess. We all kind of end up there eventually. So you might want to start there. Or any other literary events. Is there a writing conference at least in your region or your state? And then maybe you could go to that, and once you get there, you may find that they're actually trying to connect writers of similar geography together. Anne experienced that in a writing conference she went to in Chicago, which is about 3 hours from where we live, but in that one of the priorities of that conference was to break people out. So she ended up connecting with several other writers from a fairly small regional area around her. Another place to go is bookstores and coffee shops in your area. Look at those bulletin boards. Look for the kinds of events that are happening. I don't know if you live in a really small town, you might not have a coffee shop even. we do not have a Starbucks in my town. Thankfully, we have a coffee shop, but it actually only stays open till like 5 in the evening, and so it's not really a place where writers hang out. But we have a great library, so there's that. But looking in those kinds of places, that tends to be the kind of places that writing events are advertised. Another thing you might want to consider, you might need to be brave to do this, but there is an online site called meetup.com. And you would just be amazed at the kinds of groups that people form. But there are actually a lot of writing groups that advertise on meetup.com. And you would want to use all the same caution you would use for any kind of thing in which you're meeting people from online for the first time. So meet in public places and all that. But the ones I've seen, tend to meet in bookstores or coffee shops or whatever. It may be an interesting adventure. Another thing you can do is make connections online that transfer into in-person meetups. So even if you don't live in the same city as someone, maybe if they only live an hour away, you're more likely to get together with them once a quarter or something like that. In fact, I travel about an hour to go to a writing group that I'm in. I used to live in the city and I moved away. I still travel about an hour because I don't have a writing group here at the moment. I think that's changing, but it's important to me to meet up with other writers. So those are a few ideas. I have a couple of links I'll pass along. I recently wrote an article about writing groups, and in there I gave some suggestions for how to form a writing group. If you are interested in that, some of those ideas could be translated into an online writing group. So if you're really interested in connecting more with people specifically about writing, that might be helpful. So I'll give you a couple of links to that. And I think we're going to move on. Anne, were you going to talk? I think I might have gotten some of our labels wrong. Were you going to talk about the send and promote, or was I going to do that?
Well, we can talk about it together.
How about you start, and I'll start.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we're going to hit on something here that a lot of you are in the process of actually doing, which is sending out your work and promoting your work to some extent. And some of that is in the ebook form. One thing we weren't sure about, and I think it's becoming a little more clear today, is are you talking about a small ebook that you would send out to promote people, to encourage people to sign up for something, or are you talking about a long-form book that would be available electronically? So we weren't exactly sure, but each one is a legitimate thing and a legitimate process to explore together. So whether it's long-form, like On Being a Writer would be an example of that category. And Charity has edited some books, and she may talk a little bit about that too. But then there's the short giveaway type, and the process will be similar in some ways for both, but there's all sorts of elements to consider with that. For example, with On Being a Writer, we had to think through things like, what's the front matter? This would include, like, we listed things like registered copyright things, like logos and trademarks and that kind of thing, references to Apple products. We've had to put that kind of thing in the front matter. And that's the kind of thing that you want to think through, no matter whether you're doing a long form or short form ebook. You have to think about that front matter and all your footnotes and your end notes. You want to think about how you're putting the whole thing together. And you realize it's not just a matter of stringing together 10 blog posts and calling it a day. There is so much that you have to think about, from cover design, the cohesiveness of piecing things together. You know, when we write blog posts, they're often very self-contained, and they can stand alone. And then when you take that and you try to massage it and noodle it into a bigger, more whole piece, you're going to have to probably tweak it considerably to create transitions, to create connections, to create perhaps an arc, depending on what kind of writing it is. And so there is usually a lot of work involved in how to do that, so that the future project itself becomes standalone and it isn't just a series of very obviously you've just pieced together blog posts. You want it to be something new and have its own life. And so there's a lot of aspects to it. And I think Charity, has written, we did On Being a Writer together, but she's done some other projects, so she can speak into this as well. So go ahead, Charity, tell them anything that I've missed there that you have encountered.
Well, I have a couple of experiences that I wanted to share. One of them is I actually did create a little short ebook that was based on an article that I had written for another website. So if you are using any content that is published anywhere other than your own blog, you will want to just double check that you have permission to use that information. And I know that sounds crazy because it's your own work, but different websites, when they publish your work, may actually have a different way of retaining rights, or different. You may have agreed to something and you didn't even realize it. So this website was happy for me to use my own work, but they did ask that I put a short note that it was originally published at this other website first. So that might be something to think about. Also, when I wrote this little short ebook, I didn't want people to just have an option to either read it online or download it as an ebook. I wanted the ebook to really be more. So Anne mentioned this, but what you want to think about is there, maybe even as you're writing these blog posts, you could think about not giving away the whole story in the blog post or even in the series of blog posts. Thinking about what other thing that would add value to this story you're telling, or some of you may be writing more practical ebooks. So is there something like a reader's guide, or are there discussion questions? Would there be some interviews or some testimonies that you could add to the material so that it, like Anne said, is taking on a new life, something new? The editing, I've edited 2 books that the authors had taken. One of them was just a blog series, so it was a maybe some of you have participated in those 31-day projects. It was one of those. So she had written on it 31 days. So it did have a start and a middle and an end, because she knew she was going to do it for that set amount of time. However, there's just something about a blog post when you're typing it up and then you're sending it up, publishing it that day. The next day when you're writing about it, you re-say that my husband's name is Steve and my stepsons are so-and-so, and you reintroduce periods of life or people or circumstances in a way that in a book doesn't exactly make sense. So you don't want to retell the story of how you and your husband met in a book in chapter 5 when you already did it in chapter 1. So that kind of transition or that kind of flow in an ebook becomes extremely significant, because otherwise the book is going to feel very disjointed. Now, if you're just writing a series, I suppose it depends on how you present the ebook, but that was a lot of the work I did when I edited this, is making sure that one chapter followed another without it seeming like it was starting over each time. Another ebook, or this actually ended up being a book in paperback form too, but it initially was an ebook that I edited. It was a memoir, and the woman who wrote the book had been keeping these little vignettes and been writing stories and writing about her life for years. So some of it she had taken out of her journal. Some of it had actually been a newspaper article. Some of it had been blog posts. You know, she had really taken a lot of different things and just kind of smushed them together and then handed them to me. And so if you are writing in different styles or different formats, sometimes that can make a really interesting book. But what you're going to want to think about is how all of those are going to fit together so that you have a cohesive piece of work at the end in the form of an ebook. So what we ended up doing, because this woman had so many different styles, is we didn't try, some of them I actually had to completely rewrite so that it matched the other style. But some of them we just left as their own and we just called it a journal entry. So we actually had chapters and then occasionally we would throw in a journal entry. So depending on the format of all this work that you've done on your blog and now you want it to put it together as an ebook, don't necessarily assume that every chapter has to be the same length, every chapter has to be the same style. Think about all the books you've read and some of the techniques that authors have done that make it very interesting in order to switch back and forth. So like for Anne and me, every chapter had 2 points of view. So maybe you could even come up with an ebook idea in which you are now writing, you have the work that's done and now you're writing from your current self or something. So, but I guess the bottom line of what I'm saying is when you're putting all of these disjointed posts and pieces together, you really want to think about what's going to make them flow best. And you're going to want to work toward that end because that's going to make a more successful final product.
That's great. I can talk briefly about promoting things, although I don't know that that came up, so I won't spend a huge amount of time on that. And then we want to leave a lot of space for your questions. When we're finishing these projects, whatever they may be, whether it's a blog post, an ebook, a full-length book, there's the joyful and dreaded promotional stage. And you have probably been the recipient of people sending out their requests for you to take action in some way on a book that they've written, which can be really fun to support them in their efforts. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. Sometimes it can be awkward. And our publisher, being an indie publisher and being mostly represented by a single person that we know, she's not single, but she's one person, she has really encouraged us to do what feels right for your personality, and she has not pushed us to do things that are outside what we feel comfortable doing. That's kind of unusual. If you sign with a mainstream publisher, you're probably going to be expected to do certain activities whether you like it or not. And it's usually fine, and usually it just pushes you outside your comfort zone a little bit, and you're like, okay, don't really like doing this, but I will. And it often has wonderful benefits. But I have really appreciated the flexibility, and I encourage you, if you're doing this yourself for self-publishing, to maybe do 5 things per day if you've got a lot of time on your hands, or 5 things per week if time is short. Just do 5 simple things and have a little simple plan where you're really trying to actively do things and just keep that up over time. Because in the end, you're just, why did you write it in the first place? Because you wanted to get it into the hands of some kind of readers. And so if we never tell people about it, how do they know it exists, right? And so that's really the bottom line of promotion, is you just want to let the people who would be great recipients get it into their hands so they can take a look and see if it is what they wanted, and hopefully it will be, and that they'll be thoughtfully. And that, we even had somebody in the room who said they just had a project that's probably going to be for family members. That too is a very important part of sending out your work. This is maybe not promoting it, but it's sending out your work and in a gift. It's a gift, and it's a gift whether you're giving it to 5 people in your family, or if you're sending it out and hoping it goes out to 5,000 people. In the end, I think that's a big part of thinking about our writing lives. This is a gift that we're putting this down, and we hope to make you laugh or make you think, or invite you into our world in a way that we hope we can inspire you, or whatever the project is. And so as you guys work on your work, I hope that you can think of it like that, like I'm giving the world a gift. And that's why when I'm telling you about it, I'm not just trying to get, a dollar bill from you. I'm trying to, be a part of your world in a small way. Charity, do you have anything you want to add before we open it up?
No, I think we should just go ahead and open it right up.
All right. Bring it on.
Thank you so much. You've given us a lot to think about, too, and answered a lot of the questions already. Anybody have more questions that have come up? Throughout? Martha has one.
I'm just
thinking about it.
I'll
Okay. I did when you were talking, but I had the computer in my lap, so I didn't write it down. It had to do with,
I had one.
Go ahead.
You mentioned the Pomodoro technique. Is there like a website or somewhere you can read more about that?
I'll find
it. Charity will send that to you. But it's so popular that you can actually just Google Pomodoro timer and then click start, and it'll do the 25-minute countdown and then restart for the 5 minutes for you. It's awesome.
Oh, cool.
Looks like you've covered a lot of ground. I'm just still thinking.
At the beginning, Kate, you had said that there were a few things that had come to mind when you were reading, or maybe had come out in the discussions that you were having there at the retreat. Is there something that we I think it was with the distance here, I might have jumped on something you had said. Have we covered most of that?
I think so. I'm opening my other questions. Yeah, you did cover all of them that we had in the beginning, so thank you. You guys have done a great job.
I'd like to hear more about the notice habit.
Okay. Martell was asking more about the habit of notice.
Charity, I think that's something I love Charity's approach. Charity, do you mind talking about that? Notice?
No, I don't mind. So I think the first thing about notice is being aware and knowing that the things that are happening around you are the things that are going to find their way into your writing. And the next important aspect of notice is having a way to capture what you are going to be seeing and hearing and reading, having a way to capture that so that it becomes useful to you. So a lot of us end up with a purse full of Post-it notes or index cards or receipts that we write stuff down on. I think that's the most beautiful way to do it. I love doing that. I love having a big, giant, messy purse, or using my iPhone to take pictures of placards, or just take pictures of people or events or whatever. Having all of this stuff that starts to accumulate. But then, for me, the really important thing about noticing, there's two really important things about noticing. The first one is, if I am in a noticing mode, then the actual notice, the knowing that I'm noticing actually helps me remember better, because I am taking a note that I am noticing. I don't know if that makes sense, but so sometimes just the act of writing it down, or the act of stopping and saying, look, I see this happening, or I want to remember this, sometimes that actually helps me. But more often than not, it doesn't. And so I actually need to put it somewhere where I can easily get to it later. Now, this is something where you can come up with the absolute most elaborate system that you could imagine. There are many elaborate systems out there. And there are even some tools like Evernote or OneNote or some of those where you can easily put them into a digital document. Or some of you might have I used to have like 400 file folders on every topic I guess I had ever thought of ever. And so I had all these file folders, and I would just put them in there. Well, that old way of file folders wasn't very helpful to me because I couldn't get to it very easily. So now I do something really simple. I just try to put as much as I can somewhere in my laptop. Or even if it's on my phone, I sync my phone with my laptop, and now I can search it. I can search for words. If I'm smart and I label it right, I can search for the names of files. And then after you start noticing things, here's, I think, the next most important part about noticing is to start making connections between the things you notice. I think that really becomes the fodder for what you're going to write about. Like, you notice something happens, and then all of a sudden you're reading, and it reminds you of the same thing. You've just made a connection in your mind, but write that connection down. Start connecting those ideas. And again, for me, all that's important is that it's somewhere where I can search for it, because then I can, as I think about it or as it comes up, or if it's somewhere in my computer, I'm going to run across it again, because when I'm searching for something else, that file is going to pop up. So I think that those two things go together. It's one thing to notice, but it's another thing to know that you're noticing and then to make a note of it. Does that help?
Yes.
You know, Charity is leading an online workshop with TweetSpeak Poetry on writing essays. I don't know if it's full yet, but this is a big part of the essay process, is making those connections and then being able to massage and push them and smoosh them into it, one whole new idea that you're exploring. And so I think you just actually got a preview into some of the things that would be early in the workshop. I'm guessing. I don't know.
You did, actually. I just was writing that lesson in the last day or two.
That's funny. It's on her mind. But you know, a lot of our blog posts and our books are really like short if it's a blog post, or extended if it's a book, essays, because we're doing that. We're noticing, we're pulling in these things that God is bringing to our attention. And I think that, you know, as believers, I think we can say that out loud. God is drawing our attention to something. And then, okay, why? What's that there for? Why did he give me that? And we connect it to something else. And that's part of the attentiveness. And I hope you don't mind me speaking openly, just as a Christian, just the being attentive to the Spirit. What is God drawing me to? And when we write we speak to a variety of audiences, but I know most of us here are believers. And so I think that's a big part of it too, is just tuning into what God is doing in our lives, seeing that, making the connections.
Absolutely.
That's really helpful. I think just one encouragement I've taken from this too is just the reminder that, you know, our writing lives don't have to be sitting down for 4 hours at a perfectly organized desk with all the supplies that we need, but it can be PC, and yet it can still come together. And I had to laugh when you were talking about your pink backpack. I read much of your book in my van, either while I would drive my kids with their bikes in the back and let them drive around in a church parking lot, you know, ride around on their bikes, and I would just read a chapter of your book and look up every couple of pages, make sure they're still writing. And I have a little
Band-Aids.
Yeah, exactly. I have a little pocket-sized notebook spiral that I keep in one pocket of my purse, and a lot of, several paragraphs of this memoir manuscript that I've written was just scribbled out like in the grocery store line while I was waiting to pay, you know, so like lines that came. And, you know, like you talked about receipts and things like that, and even there was I will often, if I don't even have my purse on me, just my phone in my pocket, I'll email myself from my phone. Email myself like blog post idea, and then like you say, it's in your computer. You can find the email. So you know, I think that's just an encouragement that it doesn't have to be sit down for a number of hours. Obviously, once you are getting to the point where you're going to put it all together, you have to sit down at some stage. You can't. We can't just take all the notes on our phone and everything, but to, you know, not wait for those perfect scenarios and moments, but to be taking laptops to the hospital and the nursing home and making use of those spare moments, which when we have families too, and if we're working, like that's often all that we have, right? We're kind of
right. I did a podcast just this week called Progress, Not Perfection was the theme. And that's exactly what it was trying to convey. I was trying to encourage people that progress is progress. It means you're 258 words toward your goal, even if you sat down to write 500 that day. Okay, you didn't meet the goal, but if you hadn't sat down to do it at all, you would have nothing. Now you have, you have something. And I think that's part of it too. Yeah, we'd rather meet our perfect goal. We'd rather do the 25-minute Pomodoro, but maybe we only made it to 17 minutes before we had to let the dog in and the kid needed a Band-Aid. But you know what? You worked for 17 minutes when you could have just fiddled around on Facebook instead. And so progress is progress, and I think we need to celebrate that. And it helps us get further down the road.
Yes.
That's a great encouragement. Maybe while we're talking tools and resources, I'll just put in a plug for Scrivener as well. I know we've
Yes.
had a bit of conversation with Jennifer Lee on Facebook, and you commented too on that a while back. But I've really enjoyed Scrivener from an organizational point of view with writing. I can maybe share more with the group later. It is a bit of a headache for editors once you're trying to get it from Scrivener to Word. That is not ideal. But in terms of like compiling notes, research, all in one place, and having different chapters that you can move around, I've enjoyed Scrivener. It's Scrivener, if anyone else is taking notes.
Yes, and they have like a free trial. You can try it out for several days, and the timer's not on. It's 30 days of your work on Scrivener, I think. So.
Right, 30 days of use, yeah. So that's nice. Cool. Anyone else have any more questions here that have come up?
What about, right here again, what about the eclectic blogging? You know, like I've got, when we talk about the mini topics, you know,
Sure.
life, kids, adoption, healthy living, politics. Although I probably should avoid that, but you know, just thoughts that come out. What are your thoughts on that, and how to organize that? How to organize it? How to tackle it? Present it? What? Yeah. Yes.
Tie it all together.
Yes, exactly. Put the bow on it.
Well, I'm sure you're using categories on your blog, so you can think about maybe the 5 main things you tend to write about again and again. What are the passions that you come back to? And you could have, I think you could potentially have 5 somewhat different categories, and then use those categories as a way to sort your content. I think it was Amber Haynes. If you go to her website, she's done some redesign and has at the top then of her website, like blog and different things, but one of them is topics. And I think what she's done there is she has a drop-down menu, and it's basically her categories. But it shows how she's divided up her categories. She calls them topics, but it's her categories in her blog. So really it's just filtering all of the things that she tends to write about, and made it really easy and accessible for readers to find those blog posts on those topics. So I didn't go into great detail, but I don't think those are like separate articles that she's written. Those are her blog posts being filtered into those categories. So you can write about a lot of different things, and as people get to know you, how is that not like Oprah's O magazine? Those are really kind of a variety of things. And what does it all represent? Oprah. It's like the things Oprah likes. And so like when we come to your website, these are the things I'm passionate about. Get to know me, get to know these things. Now, a person could argue this completely in an opposite direction and say you need a focused blog. And there's merit to that too. You might be able to raise readership, get focus by focusing in on just 2 or 3 really, really closely related topics, and give your blog more focus. And I have ended up doing that. I was doing the O approach for years. And I wrote about food, and I wrote about family, and I wrote about travel, and I wrote about whatever came into my head. I had this curiosity journal because I'm a really lifelong learner is a value of mine, and curiosity is a value of mine. So you would never know what you were going to get from me. And people would show up for the Lazy Susan or roulette approach to my blog, like, what are we going to get today? And it didn't seem to bother them too much, but it's not like I had huge readership. And now as a writing coach, I just feel like I need to provide content that would be suitable for a writer trying to live a more productive, creative, and curious life. And so they're going to want maybe something on productivity. Oh, that was one word too, just more productive. So efficiency, productivity. But those can also be suitable to a mom, So the mom readers who came for the family articles might stick around because I don't always talk about writing. Sometimes I talk about being productive in the middle of a busy life. So they might like the pink backpack story even if they're not a writer, right? So over time I have fine-tuned that a little bit. And guess what? I lost some of the readers who wanted food. They're all unsubscribing. Where's the food? Well, I'm not serving up food on my blog anymore. And I have to realize that when I do that focus, there will be a consequence. That the people who came there for recipes every Friday, which is what I used to do, are going to be a little disappointed, and it's not going to be for them anymore. And that's okay because I changed my focus. So I have to be okay with that because I chose to be a little more specific and particular about the content I'm serving up. I'm not serving up dishes.
I wanted to add something to that too. I think so. The kind of standard advice these days for bloggers is to have a more singular focus. I think that's people are giving that advice fairly regularly, and then they're telling you to, make sure you have your name as your URL, and then they're telling you to make sure you have a tagline that promises something to your readers based on that singular focus. And I think that is wonderful if your blog is a destination blog for a certain demographic of people. There also still are bloggers who are not primarily bloggers. They are writers who have a blog about themselves, but their writing is actually going in other directions. So having an author's blog kind of opens that door up a lot. So you are the singular focus. And that's a little bit more of like what Anne was saying, but maybe it's you as the writer, the singular focus is anything you care about. And so in that case, it's fine for you to go ahead and write about whatever you want. But if you are trying to create a community or create a brand or create a destination or a product or something like that, a focus probably is going to help you get more people to your blog. It's going to help you attract the person who's there, who's then going to go tell all the other people who have that same idea. Now, I will say, however, one of the wonderful things that you can do is find the thread. That's kind of what I've done. I think Anne is saying the same thing about what she's done. I like to write about a million things, and someone told me I had to only write about one thing. And so I didn't want to do that. I wanted to write about whatever I wanted to write about. But I ended up finding the thread between all the other things I was writing about. And then the key for me then, there were going to be basically 3 distinct groups of people who might end up at my website. I wanted to make it really easy for each of those 3 groups to find out what they should do when they get there. So I actually redesigned my website to reflect, I do kind of have a singular focus, but people might approach it from 3 ways. So when you get there, you know what you're supposed to do if you're in this group or this group or this group. So some of it is not just a matter of focusing your, starting to write differently. Some of it is a matter of design, or it's a matter of how you combine things or group them together. In the notes here, hopefully you know that I've also been paying attention, but I've also been giving you lots of notes. I gave you a link to Amber Haynes' website that Anne mentioned. Another one that I love for all kinds of reasons is a website called The Art of Nonconformity. And what I love about that is this guy, for one thing, is a wonderful writer and entrepreneur, and he has an interesting way of looking at the world. But the other thing he does is he has sort of not followed the advice to have a singular focus. He kind of has 5 singular foci or focuses. And if you see from his website too, what he's done is not say, I'm only going to write about one thing. He's made it really easy for the people who come to know what of those 5 things he's writing about. So he's done some interesting things with design, again, to help. It's kind of color-coded. So when you see a post that has a blue thing, you know it's about travel. If you see another post with a red thing, you know it's about writing, or he has. I not remember all of his things, but so think maybe it's a good conversation to have, and it's something wonderful to be thinking about. But maybe you don't have to think about it quite the way you were. Maybe it's more a matter of repackaging all the ways you write rather than just writing differently.
That's really helpful advice. Thank you. I'm going to get this to go back. Computer. There we go. That is really helpful advice. I had not thought of it that way, and I'm similar to you, Charity. I don't want to just write about one thing, so that's that's useful. I think we'll take advantage of that. Great. Well, thank you so much, both of you. This has been really useful, and we're looking forward to discussing more. And thank you for also sharing about the online discussion group that will be coming up. I'm excited to share that with people on my blog in the next couple of weeks. So
Great.
thank you. Anybody else? Last thing? Should we give them a round of applause?
Thank you.
Thank you for taking time out of your Saturday to be with us. We really
It was great. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, enjoy, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. All right.